Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of your New Orleans Pelicans podcast. It is game day. We got a ton of topics to get into. Jim Eichenhofer for Pelicans.com. We're going to have fun with our next segment. Erin Summers is going to join us as we get back into action. We're going to have a little fun in the discussion portion of this year as well. Why don't you set that up for us?
Yeah, Gus. I mean, it's interesting because I feel like this week is good timing to do this because starting on Monday, this is probably the most national media attention the Pelicans have gotten all season, maybe, or at least since maybe when they were in the in-season tournament and they were playing in Las Vegas. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of go through some of the national media narratives that we hear about the Pelicans or in general and kind of discuss whether they're fair or unfair. So this is going to be, maybe this will be a reoccurring game that we play on the podcast every so often where we play fair or unfair. We throw out some national media discussion and we debate whether those takes are fair or unfair. One of them that I think comes to mind, and I think a lot of this too, I know if I'm catching people up on things that they may have missed, Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective did a really long, interesting segment about the Pelicans on Monday, and then Zach Lowe did a long thing about the Pelicans on Tuesday. So ESPN has been all in on the Pelicans this week. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I hear, just to use an example, and this will be maybe, I'm sure, something we get into when we talk to Erin in the next segment, I hear people say that the team with the best player wins in the NBA all the time. And when I hear that, I think that that's true, except for when it's not true. And part of why I say that is because when I hear people make that point, it reminds me of the 7 years that I covered a team that had Anthony Davis that often had the best player night in and night out and still made the playoffs only twice out of the 7 years that he played here. So, I mean, it's a fun thing to say and it sounds good in clips if you're going to lift like 20 seconds out of a podcast or a video to say like, you know, if you want to win in the NBA, you got to have the best player. But it's not really true because Pelicans had the best player many, many nights and it's just so much more complicated than just having the best player or the best two players. Depth matters in the NBA. You have to be able to fill out a whole roster. And I think if there's any fan base in the NBA that understands that it's not just about having one guy, I would think it's New Orleans.
About your favorite team, the Lakers. It's a clear example there. Mm-hmm. I mean, on any given night, on many given nights, LeBron James is the best player. When Anthony Davis is healthy, they do that. Right. And they have pretty much spent most of the season in 10th this year. And 9th or 10th. They haven't won but a bubble championship. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's the championship they won around that time. Mm-hmm. And so to your point, I mean, Kevin Durant, you've had Luka, you've had Kyrie pair together. They didn't even get to the postseason last year, so it takes time to do that. Mm-hmm. But I'm with you. Look, I would say Nikola Jokic, right? He's been an MVP. He's been one of the best players, and he has the best player, but he's a completely different player, or that team is different than when you had Jamal Murray. They didn't win an NBA championship until Jamal Murray came back and healthy. So it's to your point. I do think you need that player, but it's sort of like having Pat Mahomes with the Kansas City Chiefs. It's okay to have the best quarterback and the best player to do that, but you have to have somebody that blocks for him. You have to have somebody that catches for him, a defensive player, all those different aspects of that.
Yeah, and I think, too, what happens in a lot of cases, there's almost reverse engineering in that sometimes people say the best player is the best player after he wins. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you're going to make the statement all the time that, you know, you got to have the best player to win, but it's like once you win, people say, okay, now Jokic is the best player in the NBA because they won a championship. So it's kind of hard to disprove that if you're always basing it on the premise that the team that wins the championship has the best player in the league or close to that. But that's just an interesting thing. And, you know, one thing, too, before we get into this discussion that I want to set up, just on the theme of fairness, unfairness, I don't think it's realistic or reasonable to think that or expect national media in general to go beyond kind of a surface level analysis of teams, just simply from the fact that they cover. If you're covering the whole league, you have to follow 30 teams, and I don't know if there's enough time in the day to get into a ton of the specifics. But on the other hand, my criticism and my issue that I have sometimes with people that cover the NBA overall and don't get into some of the details is, if I'm covering something, just to use an example, if I'm covering hockey, which I know nothing about, I'm going to be quiet and I'm not going to make, outlandish takes because I don't know enough about it. I want to try to research it more. I just feel like sometimes people who don't know a lot about specifics of a team, the Pelicans and in our case, will still make bold statements. And I think that's the problem that a lot of fans have in general, is like people, they don't dial back how bold they are with their takes, even though they don't have a good feel for the whole situation. They don't have enough information to analyze things. So that would be my only advice to people, is like, and also too, in fairness, I mean, there are plenty of national media people who do have a ton of information. Zach Lowe, to me, is the best example. When you listen to him talk about the Pelicans, you know that he's coming from an informed perspective, that he's actually watched the games. I know that's a crazy idea to actually watch the team play. But besides that, there's other people that do it. It's just the thing that gets people's attention are the people who don't seem to follow it closely but still have a bunch of opinions.
I could have saved you a whole lot of work by just saying there are a lot of people nationally that talk about this team that have never watched them play.
Exactly.
There's no other way to make that statement, just like such as Star Power and another guy earlier this week saying this team's disappeared since the in-season tournament game against the Lakers. Tell me how you don't watch this team or even see where they are in the standings without actually telling me that. We're going to get into tonight's game against Cleveland, as well as the Cavaliers are third in the Eastern Conference. Jim will break down some of the things to keep an eye on here as well. But let's get into that discussion as we welcome in Erin Summers to the conversation. All right, let's welcome in our Pelicans sideline reporter and beat reporter for your New Orleans Pelicans, Ms. Erin Summers. So nice to see you as the team has come back from a 3-game road trip, and they came back 3-0, 18 games left. Nicely in fifth, I would say solid in fifth, but nicely in fifth. They got help while we were away, and now as we get back into the Smoothie King Center for 3 games. Erin, you can feel the excitement, can't you?
Yeah, it's been so much fun watching this team because there's different players that are stepping up and playing at another level. And we talked before they went on this road trip that they had to go take care of business, and they did. And they did it very solid fashion, especially the first half of play. They just really got out to good starts and were able to, get those 3 wins. And now, not trying to look too far ahead, but, we got a game tonight, but they are in a position where they could move up to 4th.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, they got a little help last night. The Clippers go down. Minnesota had a heck of a stretch there to really put the game away. And look, they have to play Cleveland after the Pels play Cleveland today, and it'll be on a back-to-back before they come here in New Orleans. I know you don't like to look ahead. You have to absolutely win tonight. I'm not saying you don't, but there's a possibility Friday the Pels could be playing for 4th spot in the Western Conference. So that's kind of exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's awesome. And watching some of the games last night, obviously, Kawhi Leonard did that disappearing act, and everybody's freaking out as to where he went. Right. But apparently, he's just dealing with back spasms, so he could be out of the game coming up. And obviously, tonight against the Cavs, they're without 3 of their top people, possibly Donovan Mitchell as well. So things are looking really good for the Pelicans. They got to take advantage of it before we get to that tough stretch coming up back at home.
By the way, guys, whenever I see on a TNT game where a player is walking down a hallway leaving the arena mid-game, I start to wince and my skin starts to crawl and I start to have flashbacks to 2019.
Right.
But yeah, before we get into the discussion about national media, Erin, I also wanted to ask you for your thoughts on the recent play of your fellow North Carolinian? Is that how you say it? Trey Murphy, of the way that he's played lately.
Trey's been unbelievable, and I think that he went through a spell where he wasn't playing as well after he kind of retweaked his knee and was dealing with a little bit of pain there. And I think we all were feeling for him because we know how much work he put in before he got injured originally, and then everybody had such high expectations for him. But then coming in, the way he's played of late has been huge for this team. I was looking at stuff earlier. When he scores 16 points or more in a game, the Pelicans are 11-0. So that just shows what a big impact he can make on this team to have him coming off the bench. And I know we can get into a lot of discussion about the future of this team and what it's gonna look like, but right now he's been playing really well in that spot.
Tell you one of the things that Trey's obviously 3 of the last 5 games he's led the team in scoring here as well, and I love what Willie Green said, just to get the tidbits on what he's doing as well here, not just the scoring, but I must have. Are you still bruised, by the way, on your left arm? I was elbowing the heck out of him at the watch party on Sunday, because I loved how aggressive he was. He was dunking, he was rebounding, he was going up and grabbing boards. He has that kind of athleticism, Erin. I mean, he competed in the slam dunk competition, and that's kind of my thing. I know he can shoot the 3. I know he can get 4 or 6 threes a game. But he is probably the Pell, I think, that on any given time has the ability to play above the rim. And that might sound crazy knowing that there's a player on this team that has a Jordan shoe brand. But if there's a criticism I tend to have from Z sometimes is he tends to be more of a layup guy than not. I mean, he can occasionally, you'll see the alley-oop, and sure, somebody that size get up, it brings the house down. But Trey can do it off the dribble. Mm-hmm. Trey can do it coming down the court. And I think now that he's knocking down threes, you're seeing him maybe take advantage of that, and Willie Green mentioned that. He's like, he wants to see him do that because now they're coming out to close him out. Run by him,
yeah, absolutely.
Throw it down, place will go bananas. He's capable of doing that. He's one of those players. Brandon Ingram's been doing that as of late, too, as well. We've seen him kind of throw it down. I think JD called it with malice a couple of games ago. This team needs to play like that because I think they're capable of doing it. And it's a mindset to me, Erin.
I remember early in the season, Brandon Ingram said it where they just need to be more decisive. And whether that is just going and attacking the glass and getting downhill or passing it off to somebody else, doing it quicker. And I think we're seeing them just play more confident in that, in their own abilities and trust in their teammates. And especially with the way Herb Jones is playing, you can pass it off to him and he can knock down an outside shot like anybody else right now. So I think that helps a lot. And they're kind of trying to finally figure out what their rotations are like and who you're playing around. You're more comfortable. So I think in general, everybody is just playing a little more confident. And I think that's leading to them making some of those decisions to just put the ball on the floor and go for it. That's something that Trey worked on a lot this offseason as well.
All right, well, let's have a little fun with this discussion because it is interesting to me. I am shocked by a lot of times how people nationally talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, folks. And I'm convinced they don't watch a single minute of basketball. Even if you just watch the highlights, you might be able to see some things. Like, I don't get to watch a lot of the different teams. I know you guys have League Pass and stuff like that. I got the 7-year-old, but at least at night I watch SVP. I watch the highlights and at least have an idea if they won, didn't win, and who is doing something in those highlights. Or at least look at the standings, look at the box score.
Wait, they actually show our highlights?
You would think. I mean, I think that we're on there.
It's the amount of coverage that this team gets nationally, night in and night out, is absurd.
Yeah,
I watch the highlights almost every night, and it's probably the least amount of coverage.
It's a dunk, it's a 3, it's probably another bucket by the other team or two, and then at the very bottom. But the Pelicans wind up winning. Yeah, I'm with you. It is crazy to me because I mean,
obviously the Lakers are always going to get way more hype, and it's ridiculous because they're fighting for a play-in spot right now.
Yeah. I didn't know if you know that. The Pels did win Sunday, right? We were there, we watched it and all that, but the only game that mattered was the Lakers game Sunday night. I'm not even kidding you. The audio vault that I can use for my talk show, when I pulled up ESPN, it was bite after bite after bite after bite after bite after bite of the Lakers.
Like Sports Center when they used to have the ticker on the side that told you what was coming up?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want that because I don't want to sit through all this other
Let me know.
Right.
before I get to the Pelicans.
I'm just being honest, though. Seriously, there was like 6 Anthony Davis bites, a couple of Darvin Ham bites, a couple of LeBron bites, about of his ankle and things of that nature. Then Tim Legler talked about the Lakers and who's the best matchup for the Lakers. And I'm literally just sitting here going, they are a play-in team, right? Like if they don't win that game, their season ends. I mean, that's where they are. It's crazy.
My only advice is, I'm not sure what percentage of the country gets NBA TV, but I'm one of the privileged that does get NBA TV because
right.
you know if you have NBA TV that you will see Pelicans highlights if they played a game that day. But one quick thing I was going to mention too, I watched ESPN's afternoon show NBA Today yesterday.
Yeah.
and they did a highlight package of Friday's game against the Bucks by the Lakers and then Sunday's game. How many teams in the NBA, if you had a Tuesday episode of that show, would go back to Friday highlights?
It's incredible.
That would never happen with any other team.
It's incredible. But that kind of gets us to our discussion this morning about Tim Bontemps. He says the Pelicans are a team other West teams want to see in the playoffs. Whoever plays the Pelicans in the playoffs will be favored. Now, I think on the surface, and look, there were some other things said this week here as well about lack of star power for the Pels, and some of it is fair from this aspect of it, Jim. They haven't been there. We've talked about that. There's not been a tip, a pass, a missed shot, a graph, dagger moment where C.J. McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson have been in the postseason. So from that aspect, I get it. But I don't know. Should I be upset by that?
I don't want to disappoint people that were hoping that I was going to just tear apart national media throughout this entire podcast by saying on the very first one that I think this one is fair. And the reason I say fair for this one is because I do think that there's a group of teams and I don't necessarily like this, but I think that if you're being realistic and you're saying who are some of the teams that say the Lakers or the Warriors, some of the teams that have been the Nuggets who won the championship literally last year, who are the teams that they would, if they're behind closed doors and they're telling you the truth, they would say they'd want to play. And I would say it's not just the Pelicans. It's also teams like Sacramento who haven't, maybe Oklahoma City, the teams that haven't had a lot of playoff experience, that haven't gone deep in the playoffs, to your point, Gus. I think that is legitimately, and you can, like I said, you can argue with Tim Bontemps. You can say, you can disagree with, but I do think that is a fair statement that he makes there.
Yeah, I mean, in watching this Pelicans team, I see a lot of problems for other teams. Like, who guards Zion? Can anybody guard him for an entire game? Probably not. And then if you do, you have other options, especially with the way that Trey Murphy's been playing. Brandon Ingram's been playing great. But defensively, this team is a problem. And I don't think people have taken the time to watch this team and see how disruptive they're being, how much they're locking down teams. The way Zion had 7 blocks over this road trip. I mean, he's flying all over the place, and people have been on his case forever about not playing defense. But he is. So I think they're looking at probably what they saw, on the national stage in these big games that we watched. And I think people are going to go back to that Lakers game. I think we've kind of mentioned that a few times. Like, they're on the national stage playing in the in-season tournament, and they completely dropped the ball against the Lakers. So I think that's in people's minds, and they just haven't really been paying attention since.
Couple quick things. I mean, to your point, Erin, I think I've talked about this a lot lately. Defense is the most under-discussed, under-noticed element of the entire NBA. I mean, the teams that play really good defense tend to be underrated compared to the teams that are great offensively but bad defensively.
It's not as flashy, and there's not as many highlights.
Right, for sure. And the last thing too, the part about whoever plays the Pelicans in the playoffs will be favored. I think that part is fair, partly from the standpoint of they're going to be a lower seed unless they end up finishing 4th, and if they finish 4th as a seed, they'll play a 5th seed that will probably be, say, the Clippers or the Timberwolves. So I do think that's fair too. That they're not going to be the favorite in any series that they have in the first round. But, I mean, that's the way it is. That's just the way the seeding is. That's to be expected.
All right, I feel like I'm in the national media here. So we're going to continue to play fair or not fair. Erin, we'll start with you on this one. Zion and Brandon Ingram stats are down. So that means they're not having good seasons.
I mean, this goes across the board for any sport. If you just look at stats, you're going to miss a lot of what the actual player does. And I think in the grand scheme of what this team is doing right now, they're valuing assists and playing with each other more than going out and getting theirs. So Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson's stats are down. However, their assists are up. So points and also minutes played are down. So that's going to naturally lead to some of the other stats being down as well. But it's because they are actually doing what's best for the team. I think they're playing much better as a team ball, and Willie talks about it all the time, trusting your teammates, allowing other people to go from, good to great. If somebody else is open, then by all means, pass it off. So I think that they're playing smarter in that regard, and it's not leading to some of these crazy stats on a normal basis.
I think a lot of this is just the counting stats and math. I mean, going into the season, I think you knew that if you take the fact that the big three on this team between CJ, BI, and Zion haven't played that much together going into the season, if you factor in, okay, now you're going to have a season where they all play together a lot, the counting stats for all three of those guys are going to go down because you're spreading the wealth between the three players, as opposed to, obviously, if you have two main weapons, their numbers are going to go up compared to if you have three guys that are getting most of the touches and most of the shots. And also, too, the depth of this team. I mean, they're not in a position where they need somebody to score 40, 45 points a game the way sometimes we see with the Mavericks and the Lakers. So, and last thing too, from me, the reason I think it's unfair to say that they're not having good seasons, to me, if BI and Zion continued on the trajectory where were getting a lot of individual credit, or they had great stats but the team wasn't winning, they're not going to get the due that they need for how good of players they are anyway. So, I mean, if both of those, like, say hypothetically both of their stats were higher, but this team was 25 and 39 instead of 39 and 25, nobody would care.
Right.
So it's I think that part is unfair. I think ultimately for both players to get to where they need to be and should be in terms of people recognizing them for the talent and the ability that they have, the Pelicans need to make the playoffs on a regular basis, and they need to start advancing year in and year out in the postseason.
We dealt with so many injuries last year or the past few years that, like, CJ McCollum had to take over, or Brandon when he was in, or whatever. So to your point, Jim, like, now that everybody's healthy, the depth that we have, the minutes, the points, everything's going to be distributed a little bit differently, and definitely does not mean that this team is bad.
You mentioned too the minutes are down. Part of the reason the minutes are down is because they're basically leading the NBA in wins by 20, 30 points. So at the end of, there's a lot of fourth quarters where they're not playing that much.
Yeah, see, the highlights don't tell me that, Jim. All I know is the minutes are down, the points are down, they're not playing well. But that's a very good point, though. That's a very good point to bring up. All right, let's continue. Fair, not fair. Oh, by the way, I heard at practice yesterday someone bring up to Willie Green that Brandon Ingram likely will lead the team in assists again this year. So, I mean, again, but, he's having a bad season. Anyway, fair or not fair, I love this one this week. Erin, you must. I can see the eye roll. I wasn't around you because you were busy, but I saw the eye roll when this week the Pelicans have disappeared since the play-in blowout loss to the Lakers.
I will say,
fair or not fair?
This is egregiously not fair.
Egregious.
But they did kind of fall off for a little bit while they were trying to figure out how to respond and what to do, and the rotations and who should play with who, and getting more comfortable with each other. And there was some growth that had to take place. So I will say maybe the month of December, it was a little up and down. Maybe some of January, very tough schedule in January. They got out of it 8-7 though, so that was good. But since February and this past couple weeks of March, they have been playing so much better, and have solidified themselves as a playoff team. For better or for worse, I guess, probably so. Mm-hmm. But and nobody is talking about that. Like, they might have fallen off for a little bit because the initial, oh wow, they just really blew it on a big stage against the Lakers. This team definitely isn't it. People probably put them away for a little while, but it is about time that you start paying attention to who the Pelicans are again.
I'm going to say that it's fair to say that they disappeared from discussion only because if you look at the group of teams between right now, say 4th and 10th, the Clippers are star-studded, the Suns are, the Mavs are, the Lakers are, the Warriors are, and so a lot of times when people have discussed this part of the Western Conference, they've pretty much ignored the Pelicans and ignored Sacramento. So, I mean, it's fair that they disappeared from national discussion, but not through their own fault, just because that's what people have chosen to focus on. It's definitely unfair to say that they disappeared on the court because obviously they have, like the second best record in the league since the end of December. And so, they're not they haven't been talked about as much as some of these other teams, but it's for a lot of the reasons that we already discussed where just some of the big names that some of these teams have, including the two teams that right now would be in the 9-10 play-in game that have Hall of Famers and mega stars on the roster.
So Jim is like straight up like agreeing with this national media.
He is the national media, apparently. I for sure thought you would be like, your face would be red.
He's being like empathetic with it. Like, okay,
exactly.
I understand.
It's completely not fair. You
going.
can't disappear and still be in fifth.
I said I agree with them that they disappeared from the discussion from national media. Not that I disagree that they should have disappeared.
I mean, I get it. It's a lot of like, they don't trust this team because they haven't done it yet. And you don't trust Zion because he's continually gotten hurt. Heck, he's played 52 games already this season. So he's playing. And he has made a statement about how he wants to be in the playoffs. And he is playing like it. And pretty soon, when they're back on that national stage regularly, people are going to see it. And I got to give it to, like you said, a couple of NBA TV people and stuff. Like, they are talking about him a little bit.
Yeah.
And saying that he is definitely on the right path. So, I don't know.
All right. Fair or not fair. Next topic. Ready for this? The net rating. Oh, there it is. The Boston Celtics is just in there good. They're first. Pelicans are second. Oh, but you just said it's an inflated number because of blowout wins against bad teams, and so they stat piled on. So since I don't like the Pelicans, fair or not fair, that's an inflated number because of blowout wins, so they're not really that good.
This one's unfair because everyone plays pretty much the same schedule, and I don't see all these other teams in the West or the NBA winning constantly by 20, 30 points or having a 3-0 road trip like the Pelicans just did where they were up by 25, 30 points every game. They won the first halves of those games by 60-something points. So I think that part is unfair because, their numbers definitely look better because they have so many blowout wins. But I think I'd rather win games by a lot of points than have it go down to the end, especially there's a pretty large collection of bottom-feeding teams this year. And the Pelicans have been able to not only beat those teams, but just resoundingly defeat them.
Well, if you look at the other teams that are at the top with the Pelicans in offensive, defensive, and overall net rating, it's the Celtics, the Thunder, and the Nuggets. Like, those teams are really freaking good. And if you are doing what they're doing statistically, and you're now fifth, could be fourth, like, maybe the Pelicans are also really freaking good.
I'm with you. Yeah, they are fourth in net rating right now. They're actually ahead of Denver in that category.
Oh, so they dropped from second to fourth. See, I told you they're bad.
Well, they were. Yeah. I think the part about them second is dating back to. I'm talking about over the course of the entire season.
See, now you're picking fourth. Dates, though. That's what I'm saying. It's like sitting there saying they've won 4 or 5. I want to know the whole season. No, that's the ridiculous part of this, though, right? It's that you can grab a stat, you can look at a time frame, a length of frame or whatever to try to create whatever it is. Bottom line is this. I guess I want to ask you to this. When we played fair, it was fun on that. Does it matter? And what I think it does to this extent, I think this team plays better with the chip on its shoulder. A couple seasons ago, right? Like that year that they went and gave the Suns all they wanted. This team had a chip on its shoulder. And I thought they struggled with that last year, being kind of the hunted. They got out to first. And again, I'm not picking individually on players, but I can remember clearly Jose Alvarado in the 10-game losing. He said, we're still good. I'm like, no, y'all are struggling. It's like, even Willie Green, look, we're gonna battle this out. Like, no, you've lost 10 straight. So I think this team, by its makeup, Erin, and you know these players as well as anyone because you see them at practice, you talk to them in the games, you sit next to them on a bench. I think this team likes being disrespected, at least in their mind, to an extent, right?
Yeah. I mean, they represent New Orleans, right? Like, we're petty. We like that stuff. We lean into it.
Yeah.
We want to prove people wrong. And I think, to your point about last year, the way that this team was put together, a lot of it relied on Zion being Zion. And he was in the month of December. But then he got hurt, and the team kind of fell apart a little bit. Went through that rough stretch. CJ was able to kind of revive them and bring them through for the end of the season. But this year, I don't think they wanted to put that much on any one individual. And so it took some time for everybody to figure out their roles and how to play together. And now it's really clicking at a great time. And your role players, Herb Jones, I want to say offensively, Trey Murphy, Naji Marshall, Jose Alvarado has gotten back into the rotation. Obviously, Dyson Daniels getting hurt, but they're all stepping up and playing a lot better. Larry Nance Jr. is getting some starts in the second half. So I think everybody is kind of peaking at the right time. And if you talk to any one of these players, they want to go out there and prove something because they do hear what everybody else says.
Sure.
And they don't feel that. They don't feel like they're as, I don't want to say bad, but not as good as some of these other teams that have these quote-unquote superstars. I mean, Zion and Brandon are arguably superstars. And just because they haven't done it consistently at that stage, it's not really because of anything they've done wrong. I mean, there have been injuries. There have been other stuff that have been going on to take away from that. So this year, with them being healthy, on the trajectory that they are, if they don't capitalize on it now, then there are probably going to be some bigger issues, and we probably will never be talked about again in national media. But
exactly right.
I think that this means a lot to these guys.
So you think it matters, Jim? Does it matter at all how we're perceived by the national media? I think it does to an extent in that maybe it could fuel, I think, a makeup of this team that benefits them. But on the grand scale of things, do you think they really walk in that locker room and get bothered by it?
I don't think that they have like a day-to-day thing of paying attention to it, but I do think that I agree with both of you guys in terms of including what Erin was saying as far as that they are motivated by the fact that they're not held in the same esteem as some of the other teams and that they don't get as much attention for it. But you're right, Gus. I mean, I think I'm sure a lot of Pelicans fans would say the same thing too, that they like being the under the radar team. As much as we might complain and be like, you know, it's unfair the way that they are discussed sometimes and treated. I do think that there's a little bit of a, like you said, chip on your shoulder mentality to this. But, you know, from kind of a different angle, when you ask the question, does the national media coverage matter? The way I look at it a little bit too is like, I don't think ultimately it really matters in terms of the team's success or just the broad big picture, but it matters from the standpoint of fans because a lot of times that is, besides some of the local coverage, that is the only coverage that people get. So a lot of people are watching ESPN every day and they are watching some of the other shows and they're listening to different podcasts. Make sure you listen to this one first before you listen to the others.
I like the plug, yeah.
But yeah, I think it matters just from people get frustrated because they expect more and they expect better coverage. They expect more thorough analysis and they expect things to be more factual and less, you know, speculative as far as people's assessments of the Pelicans.
Well, Windhorst was talking about on his pod this week, like the defense and how we've been so good defensively, especially 3-point shooting percentage defense. But he straight up said, I haven't watched enough games to be able to tell for myself what it is that they're doing. Mm-hmm. So at least he admitted that.
Sure.
Like, I haven't watched enough. So I think overall that's the main issue here. And the Pelicans haven't been on national TV as much as some of these other teams have. Right. So you haven't gotten a good gauge of it.
Yeah.
But
look, at the end of the day, I do think we'll see what happens, and you do your talking on the court. And the next three are going to be pretty important and special here as well. I'd love to get the blender going and popping, and I think that's going to happen. Erin, the final 11, I know we've talked about this a ton. They just are what they are. Whether you're good or bad, it would be hard for the Lakers, the Bucks, anybody. Those final 11 games you're playing, 8, I think, of those 11, if not 9 of those 11, that are currently in the playoff standings in the top 10 on both conferences. They're going to be playing for standings as well. Some away, some here. They're hard. Get as much as you can before. I said last week, those 3 games on the road, if you can go 3-0, with the help that you could be getting, you could be in a good spot. If they go 2-1 in this homestand, I love 3-0. But 2-1 as well against specifically these two teams, like Friday night, you know, that back-to-back against Portland's tough, but you're at home, you know, you're at least going to bed Friday night and waking up in your own place. And this team's been pretty good on back-to-back. So let's see what happens here. But this is kind of an important homestand as well to try to get some wins in.
Yeah, I think this would be huge going off of that 3-game road trip to come in here and carry that momentum. You know, they had a couple days off here going into this game against the Cavs, but like I mentioned earlier, the Cavs are dealing with a lot of injuries. They haven't been playing their best. They're on a 2-game road slide. They've only been putting up 106 points a game over that stretch, so they haven't been playing at their highest level. So hopefully the Pelicans can kind of come in and take advantage of that. And then again on Friday night, we don't know who is going to be in and out for the Clippers, but with a lot on the line there, it would be huge for them to take advantage of that game as well. And then, yeah, I mean, the Trailblazers would just be laying you up.
Give Erin a follow over on X, Erin E. Summers. Let's have some fun tonight and hopefully get another win. It's good to see you.
Definitely sounds good. Cannot wait.
All right, Jim. Our thanks to Erin Summers there. And look, I'm ready to get going into tonight's game. And you kind of mentioned it, and you guys did as well, about the Cavs. Just quickly touch on them. That injury report for them not having maybe some players. I don't know if they're going to have Spider or not, but Donovan Mitchell is one of those guys that's been playing really well. That team's really good here as well. They got a back-to-back coming up, so I kind of wonder.
Yeah, Donovan Mitchell is questionable for tonight's game, and then they have 3 rotation guys who are all listed as out and definitely won't play. That's Evan Mobley with the ankle, Max Strus with the knee. Remember, he made a 60-footer to beat the Mavericks recently. And then Dean Wade is another guy. He had a huge game against Boston, I think it was about a week ago. He's also out for personal reasons. So, yeah, a big chunk of the guys that they rely on are not going to play tonight, Mitchell being the biggest one that we're going to have to find out later today whether he's playing or not. So we'll see. One of the keys I had for tonight's game is going to be the benches, because the Pelicans bench has been so good lately. Trey Murphy obviously has been on fire. And with all of these guys that Cleveland has out of the mix, that's bumping up a bunch of guys who haven't played very much this season into players that are in the second unit, guys that are now 7th, 8th, and 9th men that were previously 11th, 12th, 13th men who weren't getting in games at all. So that could be something that the Pelicans take advantage of. When the starters come out of the game, the Pelicans have a collection of players that are a lot more proven than what Cleveland will put on the floor tonight.
All right, I hear you. Hey, it's Wednesday, which means it's Western Conference Wednesday, and that means what?
It means it's time to look at the team to watch. Now, I have bad news, Gus. I believe the curse of the Western Conference Wednesday team to watch has been broken. And of course, it had to be done by the dreaded LA Lakers. They went 2-1 over the last 7 days. Started out promisingly for me with they had a 10-point home loss to the Kings, but then they beat the Bucks by 1 and they beat the Timberwolves by 11. So Lakers go 2-1. They're 36-30. They're still 4 games behind the Pelicans, so the Pelicans still have a pretty decent cushion over them. The team to watch this next 7 days that I'm going to hope to work my magic on is the Phoenix Suns. And they are 1.5 games behind the Pelicans right now at 38-27. Big reason I pick them is because their schedule is really interesting. They're at Boston Thursday night, TNT game, at Charlotte on Friday, and then at Milwaukee on Sunday, which is an ABC game. So going to be on national TV. I know we talked about national media a lot in this podcast. 2 of their 3 games that they have over the next 7 days are on the national airwaves and against 2 of the top, 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. So curious to see how the Suns do over this next stretch. And beyond even the short term, they have the toughest schedule remaining in the entire NBA over the remainder of the season. So I'm not going to get into this today. We might talk about it later down the road. But if you look at their last 8 to 10 games of their schedule, it's incredible how difficult Phoenix's slate is. So those are that's the team to watch for this Wednesday. And one thing quickly too before we go, Pelicans are only 2 games behind the Clippers now for 4th place. The Clippers are at Chicago on Thursday night before they play in New Orleans on Friday. Obviously, the Pelicans play the Cavs tonight. So if New Orleans wins tonight, they're going to go into that Friday game against the Clippers either 2 games behind the Clippers or maybe even 1 game behind the Clippers. So you get within 1 game if the Bulls are able to upset the Clippers on Thursday. If you're 1 game behind them going into that, you have a chance to push the Clippers out of 4th and move into that number 4 spot. I never would have imagined that it would be possible for that to happen so quickly.
Yeah.
Considering not long ago, I believe the Pelicans were a solid 5-6 games behind the Clippers in the standings.
That's why we talked about why that road trip was so big. You had to go 3-0 because they were playing other teams and more difficult teams. And I mean, look, you look at the teams that everybody else is playing in the Western Conference, and they're all challenging. Again, look, the Cavs are absolutely challenging. They're third team in the Eastern Conference, but what I mean is when you look elsewhere, the Nuggets are playing the Heat. The Warriors are playing the Mavericks tonight. The Lakers are playing the Kings.
Yeah, those are two good ones.
Yeah, so if you could somehow get a win, it's what Graf always said. We're in this 2.5-week stretch where if the Pels get a win, they're going to gain ground on someone. Just based on because other Western Conference teams are playing each other.
Right.
So if you win, somebody in the standings drops a game.
And it's true, too, that not only the Pelicans are about to end this long stretch tonight of playing only against Eastern Conference teams, there's a lot of other teams in the West, true as well, that are almost done playing the East or 90% done. So if you look at the last 2 weeks of the schedule or so in April, it's almost all games of West versus West. So like you said, you win and there's going to be some advantages gained.
It's why we talked about that cushion was so important. 2 or 3 games cushion could be really big, even from, like I said, I want to get to the spot where what we've been doing. We're talking about 4 or 5 or matchups or what first round. It's not even just us. The national media, as much as we like to make fun of, they're talking about what matchup's going to be easier for teams. They already have the Pels in.
Right.
And that's what I'm getting at is that they're playing so well and there's just so few games left, Jim, that I think you can comfortably, you're a full 5 games from the 10th spot. Okay? So Golden State's 10.5 back, you're 5.5 back. I'm not saying you can't go there and have a bad stretch. I'm just saying with 18 left, I haven't seen this team play to where, you would have to have injuries. Several injuries, I think, for you to go 3-7 in the next 10. Does that make sense? I haven't seen this team do things that get you to believe, man, that 5-6 game losing streak's around the corner. I don't see that. I think they're consistent. And to your point, when you have those teams playing Western Conference teams, I don't think you're going to see a 6-7 game win streak. And that's what you would need to go from 9 or 10 to 5 or 4 or 6. Like, you have to win 6-7 in a row, and then 2 or 3 teams have to lose 4 or 5 in a row. There's only 18 games left.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at. If this was December, I'm good with that. 18 games left. That's what I'm trying, I guess, to kind of tell Pels fans is we're not there yet, but it's looking like if you just take care of your business, go 2-1 in a 3-game stretch, 3 of 5 things. I think you're good. Just keep playing the kind of basketball you're playing, and I don't see you having to be sitting here with the dreaded win or go home plan.
Absolutely. The way that they're playing lately, where they're not only winning games, but they're dominating in a lot of aspects. They just keep playing the way that they're playing, and things are going to be looking even better than they are right now. And it's funny to think that by Saturday night, which is not long from now, they'll only have 15 games left at that point because they have 3 games in the next 4 nights, all in the Smoothie King Center.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, we'll see you at the Smoothie King Center. It's Jim Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com. Jim_Eichenhofer. We'll see you on Friday, hopefully talking about another win and previewing a very big game against the Clippers. It's Gus Kattengell. Thank you for tuning us in on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.